is this lead paint disclosure that a buyer's agent has to make to a seller? What is going on? Hi, everybody. Dana Sparks, broker of Maximum One Greater Atlanta. And today's contract tip is just a quick explanation of a new lead-based paint disclosure form that GAR, Georgia Association of Realtors, has added to the contract package for a buyer's agent to make a disclosure to a seller should the house be built prior to 1978 or there be a lead-based paint hazard in the house. So let me share my screen and dive in. So we know that if a house was built prior to 1978, there is a possibility that there is lead in the paint or any hazard in the house that was painted prior to 1978, and that must be disclosed per EPA regulations. So the lead-based paint disclosure, which is GAR Form F316, this is the disclosure that a seller is required to make to a buyer regarding the possibility of lead-based paint in the property. There's the seller's disclosure, buyer's acknowledgement, agent's acknowledgement. Now, in July of 2024, GAR added this cryptic sub-paragraph under agent acknowledgement. And it has a place for initials, and it says the buyer's agent has informed the seller of the seller's obligations under this code and is aware of his or her responsibility to ensure compliance. So why on earth is a buyer's agent communicating with a seller? Well, GAR gives us a hint. It goes on to say this is only required, meaning the buyer's agent's disclosure to the seller and the buyer's agent's initials, only required if the buyer's agent is receiving their compensation directly from the seller. So if the buyer's agent, buyer's broker's compensation is coming as a co-op deal from the seller's broker or directly from the buyer, you don't need this. If, however, the buyer's broker is getting compensation directly from the seller and there is a possibility of lead-based paint, then the buyer's agent not only has to initial this, but then they have to perform. The buyer's agent actually must inform the seller of their obligations. So how do you do that as a buyer's agent? There is a new GAR form F317, buyer's broker's notice of to seller of seller's obligations. So let's look at that form. This is a brand new form in 2025, and basically it is a notice, so you only need one signature, and you identify the property, you put in the name of either the buyer's broker or the agent working, representing the buyer, representing the broker. And these are the obligations that the seller must comply with per EPA regulations regarding the possibility of lead-based paint. So this is the buyer's broker telling the seller what they need to do. And these four things are what the seller needs to do. Disclose to the buyer the presence of known lead-based paint or lead-based paint hazards. Provide the buyer with all available records and reports pertaining to lead paint hazards in the residential housing. Provide the buyer with a lead-based paint hazard information pamphlet in a form approved by the Environmental Protection Agency, or EPA. And 4, permit the buyer to have a 10-day period to conduct a risk assessment or inspection for the presence of lead paint hazards. Again, so if you're a buyer's agent getting paid directly by the seller and the house was built prior to 78, or there is the possibility of a lead-based paint hazard in the house, first thing you need to do is initial the lead-based paint disclosure. Second, and saying you're going to inform the seller of their obligations. Second thing you need to do is actually inform the seller of their obligations using this new form. You sign it. Obviously, you can't cross a sign, so you don't talk directly to the seller, but you would send this notice to the listing agent, to the broker representing the seller. So that's what this new form is about. A couple of things while I am here. GAR also in 2025 created this same form, but it is for a seller's broker to notify their own client seller of their obligations regarding lead paint. However, if you are a listing agent working with the seller, there is the possibility of lead-based paint. If you sign the seller brokerage agreement, this language is already contained in paragraph B7 under the lead paint disclosure. These 4 things that the seller is required to do is already spelled out in the exclusive seller brokerage agreement. So if you're a listing agent and you've signed this, you don't need this form. Those 4 things that you've already notified the seller of their obligations and what they are required to do. If you have not signed a seller brokerage agreement, then you are, as a seller's agent, going to have to do that. But I just wanted to bring this to your attention as a buyer's agent because it's different and it can be a little confusing. One other thing while I'm here. If there is the possibility of lead paint in the house, a buyer is entitled to a 10-day period to conduct a risk assessment or inspection for the presence of lead paint. That is above and beyond that. That is not due diligence. That is a separate inspection period from due diligence. So thank you so much for watching. I hope this brief video clears up that new form for 2025 regarding a buyer's notice to a seller regarding their obligations per the EPA if there's a possibility of lead-based paint in the house. Thank you so much for watching. Dana Sparks, broker of Maximum One Greater Atlanta, satisfying your needs with service, innovation, and education. Bye. If you like that video, check out the one here. If you like the content on this entire channel, please click here to subscribe. I try to take even the most complicated of real estate situations and make them crystal clear. See what I did there? Real estate made crystal clear. Thank you guys so much for watching.